My name is Ann Phelan. I'm the Manager of Resources and Engagement, along with my colleagues who are joining me today from the Transition Center at Perkins School for the Blind. We're very happy to have you here, and we thank you for carving out time. So today you came together to be part of a community, and this is our third part of a series on housing, and we're really excited to welcome you today. We can go to the next slide, Janine. Today we'll be talking a little bit, but first I want to share with you that you're registered for this event and the whole series, so you will get a copy of the recording after the event ends next week. Our fourth part of a series is on the 28th. We also want you to take a moment to look at this slide that we're showing on how you can save the chat, because in the chat, professionals and parents are sharing websites and resources, and you may want to look back at those. But we will also send you a PDF version of the chat with your slides. So don't want you to stress too much about what's going on in this chat. But again, if you're just joining, please put your name if you wish, and the state you're in, and the age of your child. And if you're a professional, your website, so people can contact you. And please also indicate what state you work, because we do have quite a few professionals from the housing domain here in our community. So thank you all. So just take a look at the slide. I just want to recap last week. So last week we had Doran Cummings, and Doran was sharing a lot, basically that funding really is very different in each state, but there is a lot of commonality as well on how to access funding through your Department of Developmental Services, state funding, and federal funding as well. But building a community is key, and here we are. This is our housing community. We've been together for now 3 weeks. We have one more week to go, but it doesn't end there. We'll continue our community, and we'll talk about that later. It's really important to be flexible in location and looking at options that are going to best fit your adult child, whether home is the next step for a while until you pursue other opportunities, or whether you have funding or finances that will allow housing right after graduation. But remember, the next step is not the last step. We can go to the next slide. Thank you, Janine. So today I'm really excited to introduce Desiree Kameka Galloway. And Desiree is from the Autism Housing Network. We want to thank you so much, Desiree, for being here today. And I want to acknowledge something, Desiree, and for everyone. Desiree was just awarded by the Autism Society of America the Daniel Jordan Fiddle Foundation Leader in Adult Autism Awards. So Desiree, I want to acknowledge that. That's a big deal. Congratulations on that. And thank you for taking time to meet with our community today on our third week of our series in housing.
I am super excited to be here. Thank you for having me. I'm the director of the Autism Housing Network, which is a project of the Madison House Autism Foundation. I will say that the Autism Housing Network is not just autism specific. It came from an autism foundation, and so we named it the Autism Housing Network. But over the last decade, we've certainly include resources and opportunities and learning for those from the broad spectrum of intellectual and developmental disabilities. I'm also the CEO of Neuro-Inclusive Housing Solutions, and I help local communities vision and imagine and collect data to develop more housing in their community. So when we think about the future, I want to kind of frame this in a way where think about pieces of a puzzle that can come together, or building of a web, so that when one part of the web falls down, we don't lose everything necessarily. And so that's why I organized our agenda today to talk about, first, of course, person-centered choices, but then, how some of the pieces of residential options can fit together so that you can think about what works best for you or your loved one. We'll do a quick look at some of the public funding options, just so you're aware of the programs that are out there, and then we'll open it up for a question and answer. So when we talk about person-centered choices, I really want you to think about not just, okay, I need to find the perfect program for someone. I really want you to think about what is important for that individual. What makes them feel alive, feel stable, feel secure, and then start putting those pieces together. And that's what we talk about when we're saying something is person-centered, is really starting with the individual instead of starting with a program. There are three aspects that I really want you to hone in on when you're exploring options. The first is those individualized residential services. These are paid for either through a Medicaid waiver or private pay. And we're going to go into detail on what's called service delivery models in a moment. The second aspect is, of course, the housing. Location, type, design, whether or not you want roommates, what's the cost, what's the ongoing cost. So thinking about the bricks and mortar is also very important. But there's this third aspect that is so critical, and that's one's natural support system. Those in the person's life that care about them. Some people call those friends, right? Additionally, some properties will have supportive amenities, and those are kind of like extras, life skills classes, social opportunities, maybe people who live close by. Those supportive amenities can sometimes be very, very helpful for individuals who don't qualify for a waiver. I'll give you an or on the other end, for people who maybe some days it's unsafe to get in a vehicle, right? There are some individuals on the spectrum or who have other IDD where, you wake up on the wrong side of the bed and it's really hard to get into a vehicle to go somewhere, or going into the community is going to take a lot of spoons and there is a chance of a meltdown. So being able to have opportunities outside of their door to do things is sometimes very, very helpful for individuals with high behavioral support needs. So as we progress in this presentation, I'm going to be using terms from the place in the world. And that's because states call different service delivery models and housing options different things. We created this resource, this free resource, so that we have a common language. So we can have presentations like this, and I can use the same language and we mean the same thing, but also for researchers, so that researchers can really start comparing apples to apples and not apples to oranges. We're going to cover how are long-term support services and housing connected? What are the financial options for housing? In what ways can people access services? What are the different types of housing development? And then what are some physical and supportive amenities? And there's a few videos I have sprinkled in here, so you're not just listening to me talk. So the first thing that's really important to talk about is the difference between provider-controlled and consumer-controlled settings. A provider-controlled setting means that one's housing and services are connected. They cannot be separated. You find a service provider that you love, they're going to manage the housing, they're going to take care of the housing. They're going to be able to adapt the housing as needed. They're going to find roommates. Provider-controlled housing means that your services and your housing cannot be disconnected. That also means if you no longer like your service provider, you're going to have to move. Consumer-controlled housing means that one's housing and their services are disconnected, meaning you choose the housing that you prefer, and then you also choose your service provider and service delivery model. This is very helpful for some people who might know that they're going to have changes down the line or who want that flexibility, but it also adds a layer of responsibility because the housing and the service provider is disconnected. So it's important to think about that moving forward. The trend across our nation is to have more consumer-controlled options. And this is because people are choosing to have that flexibility. I would like to warn you all and to be very aware of, look at the service offerings in your state, because for people with high support needs, sometimes they don't have the option for consumer-controlled settings because your state waiver maybe has a cap on funding or a cap on in terms of those who use consumer-controlled service delivery. So it's really important to understand, if you have high support needs, can you live in your own home or is advocacy needed, right? So what are the financial options? Medicaid never, ever, 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 ever pays for community-based housing options. So even if you live in a group home, you're going to use the majority of your SSI or SSDI, most likely, for room and board. They only pay for housing in an institutional setting. So an intermediate care facility, a nursing facility, state-supported living centers, those type of things. They do not pay for housing. So it's really important that you are always thinking about how am I going to pay for housing, even in a group home or a host home type setting, a provider controlled setting. So first way, your rent, right? You could rent on the free market. Whatever housing is out there that's accessible to you, you could rent that home. In our country, there are two ways in which housing is made affordable. The first way is through what's called a housing voucher. And if you're able to access one, because there's waiting lists all across the country, the individual with the disability only has to pay 30% of their income, and that voucher picks up the rest. Right? So the landlord accepts two checks, one from your local public housing authority and one from the individual, but you are only paying 30% of your income. The second way that housing is made affordable in our country is that housing developers are subsidized. They are given money to build housing, and they promise that a certain number of units are going to be affordable. And so you can then choose to live in a development that utilizes a subsidy. There are many now neuro-inclusive housing options that have used subsidies so that they have deeply affordable rent that's tied to the property. And then, of course, you could rent a room in a provider-controlled setting. So really quick, I want to kind of show you, if you're interested in that affordable housing option, how you can get there. You go to the HUD website, you select your state, right? Once you select your state, you're going to have a long list of links. Please take a look at them because they're very helpful. But it's important that you're looking at whether or not you want affordability through a housing voucher or whether you want affordability through a subsidized unit. Next slide, please. Right, so you're going to select Get Rental Help. Next slide. I chose Indiana as just an example. And then you'll see that on the HUD website, you can search for a subsidized apartment or you can look for your local public housing authority. Next slide. You know, the other trend now for those who can afford it is home ownership. And housing vouchers can be used for a mortgage payment. Your PHA needs to be able to designate that, but they can be used for that. So this is another reason, owning one's own home, some people can afford it and they don't want to rely on the rental market. And so some families will bequeath their own home. I have a really good friend. Her name is Amy. She uses a power wheelchair, and her home has been modified since she was a little girl to be totally accessible for her. She could navigate her home with her caregiver very, very independently. And so for her family, it makes a lot of sense for her to just stay in the family home, and her parents will eventually move out. And then she has chosen to have a shared living arrangement, which means her living caregiver would live with her, and she would rent out another room for some additional income. So some people will choose to bequeath the family home. Similar is adding an accessory dwelling unit or a tiny home on a family or a friend's property. It kind of gives that privacy, right? A separate entrance, but allows for that either paid or natural support system to be right there. Some families will be able to purchase a home for their loved one. There are neuro-inclusive plan communities and co-housing communities that are looking for people to purchase homes that are being designed specifically to be accessible to individuals with intellectual developmental disabilities. And then, of course, you could purchase a home with others. There are a few organizations that help families understand and connect with others to purchase homes. One organization is called Partners for Housing. And if you are from Washington, you can get the residential assessment for free and be part of their roommate matching pool. You can also go to the Autism Housing Network, and on the homepage, we have an article that talks about it. There's another organization in Illinois called Centers for Independent Futures that is helping families understand how to secure housing and kind of put the pieces in place for residential options. Okay. So now we're going to talk about residential services, very specifically, what can Medicaid pay for? And of course, if you have the ability to private pay, there are amazing private pay communities. Marbridge is one of them. I saw Scott join. But not everybody can. And so accessing a waiver is really important. Every state, right, has their developmental disability agency who manages HCBS waivers, home and community-based waivers. Every state has different service offerings and different waivers. So it's very important that you are looking at what does your state offer, not necessarily what the state next door offers. There are waiting lists in most states. There are eligibility requirements in most states. And it's very important that if you're thinking about the future or moving, if you are in a state that has a high waiting list and you're receiving services, you want to look at does this other state that you're looking at, what's their waiting list? Because once you move, you drop to the bottom of a wait list, even though you were receiving services in your state. So it's really important to know where that state is in terms of the wait list. And you can find your state agency at the NASDA's website. Next slide. So you can receive services in lots of different ways now. Again, every state has different options, so it's really important that you are looking at if this service delivery model is available in your state. But I will tell you that all of these service delivery models are available in certain states. You just have to make sure that your state has that, and if not, start advocacy. And so the first option that I want to talk about is a host home. This is also sometimes called adult foster care. Next slide, please. This is sometimes very helpful for people who want to have a family environment. It's a live-in caregiver option. You are moving into your support provider's home. This might be very helpful for some people who maybe have a lot of healthcare needs because your host home provider will go with you to these appointments. I was a host home provider. So I've been in this role supporting a roommate who has a disability. And it's really important that you find the right fit. Some considerations, because this is a provider controlled setting, you will have to move if your relationship changes. So just like what happened in my home, my little sister was going through some challenges and she needed to move in with me. And I needed to support my sister at that time. And so I had to ask the young man who was living with us, where I was his host home provider, I had to ask him to move because our situation changed, not because my relationship with him. And so it's really important that you think about this when you're looking at host home models. Next slide. Very similar, a live-in caregiver is shared living. Now, some states call host homes shared living. So be very sensitive when you're looking at this in your state. In a shared living arrangement, the person with the disability can invite someone without a disability or with a disability to support them. So they are inviting their support staff in their home. This is a consumer controlled setting, different than a host home, which is a provider controlled setting. Has the same benefits as a living caregiver, right? Same person in the morning and at night, same person to go with you for healthcare. You have that support for transportation when transportation services maybe fall or you don't have, transportation to somewhere. But it's also important to think about, do you really want to live with your support staff? It might be too close, or you might get annoyed with them too often. Dishes are always an issue, whether you have a disability or not. And so I want you to consider what that looks like. We're going to watch a video, and this is a LARSH community. So this is a little bit different than an individual inviting just one person into their home to have a shared living arrangement. In LARSH communities, it's a shared living environment where there are multiple people with disabilities and there are multiple support staff. And the people with disabilities remain as what's called core members. And then those who live in the home, they may change over time, but those individuals with disabilities are always there. In general, when you're looking at service providers, it is so important to kind of feel out where are their values, where are their heart, Does their culture understand my culture? So this video is just an example of a shared living arrangement, which is more than just one person inviting someone into their home, but multiple people who are living together in a shared living arrangement.
L'Arche is a place where we are led by the core members, the adults with intellectual disabilities.
Life is like to make people happy, smile, laughter, and have fun out there.
We make friends and we have connection.
But at large, everyone is around the table and everyone is welcome. It's a movement, a new way of living.
L'Arche is a place where they want to reinstitute livelihood, the real livelihood that people ought to have. The society ought to be like that. One day I'll be old too. I need to be cared for. So where will I be? I want to be in a place like this.
I had fun. For him to hang out with.
Thanks.
You too. I think the big thing that L'Arche has called out of me is to find God in setting the table with Francine, in walking around the block with Hazel, in playing basketball or soccer with Fritz.
You just see the love, the life that exists. Even whether like people are sad and grieving, we grieve together. You know, we love, we laugh together. Even on the days where everybody is sick or grumpy, you know, it's still great.
I attended a Tuesday night celebration here. I saw a side of Deborah that I hadn't seen, really, and I realized just how much she could come out of her shell more. The quieter we get, the less we try to lead over her and just support and walk alongside her.
We're so immersed in it that we forget how extraordinary it is. Walking with Michael to McDonald's. The very first time I walked with him 10 years ago, I walked through the neighborhood and it was like, am I walking with a celebrity? It's like, hey Mike, you know, Michael. Oh, this guy, he's known me since I was a baby. It was like all of these stories. And I'm like, Michael is totally transforming the ecosystem of this neighborhood. We're so immersed.
So there are multiple L'Arche communities across the country. I encourage you, if desired, to. Oh,
the very first time I walked.
You can go to the next slide.
Ago, I walked through the neighborhood.
Okay, perfect. So just a quick note about L'Arche. There are L'Arche communities across the country. You can go to their website. You can join them for dinner one night. So I always look when I'm traveling for presentations and stuff, is there a L'Arche community? And I join. And you can join them and talk to them and see what it's like to live in a shared living arrangement. So I invite you to do so. Fritz, I remember when I visited the one in Greater Washington, Fritz was in the video. One of his roommates was talking about going fishing the next day. And Fritz does not have a lot of language. But he indicated he wanted to go. And so, you know, he went fishing with his roommate the next day. It was just kind of, we're having a conversation. This is an opportunity. I'm going fishing. Do you want to come? Anyone want to go fishing with me? So it's kind of these just life happens and people can join in shared living arrangements. It's not necessarily as easy when there's rotating staff like we're about to talk about. So agency-based rotational staffing, this is really the predominant model that we see now. This is how group homes work, and this is how a lot of support staff works, where you choose an agency that you like, where you share their values, and they are responsible for getting to know you, getting to know your support needs, and then recruiting, training, hiring, firing, and scheduling staff. Okay. If if someone calls in sick, the agency is going to replace that staff. This is a lot of people coming in and out of one's life, which for some people, that is great. They're social, they want to have different stories, different people, different things to talk about. But for others, it might be overwhelming to have that many people. So understanding what is, typically scheduled. Am I going to see the same 5 people every week, or am I going to see 15 people every week? Is important to communicate. In agency-based rotational staffing, you also have less involvement in who is going to be your support staff. So alternatively, a different version of this is self-direction. Next slide, please. Self-direction is when you, as the individual and support team, get to choose exactly who you want as your support staff. So what happens is you are evaluated, you are given a budget, you are introduced to someone who's going to help you as a fiscal intermediary, so pay your support staff, and you get to choose who you want to support you. In some states, that could be a family caregiver as well. It could be a friend from high school. It could be someone from a faith community. It could be anybody you choose. You get to also choose what they get paid. You do all of the training. You make all of the rules. So it really is very individualized. But this also comes with a lot of responsibility, because you are also having to do that recruiting, that scheduling, that training. And if staff cancels or doesn't show up, you are also responsible for finding in who's going to fill in. So self-direction is great for those who want that choice, high choice, but it also might be too much responsibility for some people. It could be too overwhelming to have to manage all of those support providers. Next slide. A different way in which we're seeing more and more is a paid neighbor. So think about someone who is close by, within walking distance, and can be accessible. So maybe somebody doesn't always have to have 24/7 support, doesn't have to have a person in their home, but they need someone really close, or they need someone if there's an issue to prevent a meltdown, right? Someone very close, right next door, that is maybe on a schedule that can come and check in. This is a paid neighbor. Something to consider is that it might not be enough support, so you might layer a paid neighbor with something else. Also, that paid neighbor could potentially be supporting several people in, for example, an apartment building. And so they might not be accessible to you right away. So that's really important to think about as well, is if a paid neighbor is a good scenario for you, or does it need to be layered with another service delivery option? The last service delivery model I want to talk about is remote support. So remote support is exactly what it sounds like. It is virtual support. There are cameras within someone's home, maybe on tablets or video screens, where an individual on the other side of the screen knows that person and is able to support them virtually. Maybe it's just answering a question or reminding them about a schedule. This can really be great for people who have lower support needs, who want an increased sense of independence. They don't necessarily need a human being in their home, but they need access to support. And some people might not feel supported enough in a remote support situation. Remote support can also be layered with what's called enabling technology, so smart home technology built into the home. We're going to watch a video that is an example of one company that provides both remote support and enabling technology. So they use both of these tools layered together to support people living in their own home. So please play the video.
People with intellectual and developmental disabilities want to live independent, self-determined lives just like everyone else. With the right support and grand care technology, they can. With our cognitive assists, remote monitoring, and virtual visits, grand care is the least intrusive and most efficient way to facilitate successful independent living. People with disabilities can do things for themselves if they have the right prompts. Grand Care has a built-in calendar that caregivers can access remotely to keep everyone on track. But it also has day-to-day to-do tasks that you check off as you go through your day. For more detailed prompting, Grand Care has activity reminders. These have enumerated steps that are spoken aloud and contain video instruction as well. With these, even the most complex tasks are achievable. Sometimes people need face-to-face help. When a phone call is not enough and a knock on the door is too much, Grand Care has virtual video visits. Caregivers can call the touchscreen for a secure video call with the resident. They feel supported and independent. You get to hear and see how they're doing without ever getting behind the wheel. And that's not all. Grand Care uses wireless motion and door sensors, so caregivers can be alerted if there is activity at a time and place when there should not be, or if there's no activity at a time and place when there should be. Once alerted, support staff is just a call away, so that human support is right there exactly when it is needed. Grand Care also helps people stay healthy. It can remind you to take your medication at the right time and even track your medication adherence. Grand Care is also a fully featured telehealth monitoring system. Whether you need to take your blood pressure, glucose, weight, temperature, or oxygen, Grand Care is there not only to remind you, but to also automatically record those readings in your Grand Care chart. Want to know more about Grand Care? Drop us a line. We'd love to show you how we help everyone stay safe, supported, and independent.
So now we're going to transition from talking about individualized services to housing.
Desiree, just a quick mention. Thank you so much. Just going to pause for a minute and catch up on a few questions. Is Grand Care a model that's replicated by other agencies across the country?
So Grand Care can be utilized by service providers. Your state has to approve and accept remote support as a service delivery model. I will say there are, I believe, 14 states now across the country that are considered technology first states. And so they are really looking at how technology can be utilized as a service delivery model. If you look at the state of the states in developmental disabilities at the University of Kansas, they track and have done a lot of research and work and can tell you if your state is one of those technology first states. So yes, yes and no. It depends.
And the next question, does Medicaid help cover that support, that program?
Again, depends on your state. If your
Okay,
state has remote support as a service delivery option, yes, but if they do not, then no.
So in short, for Prul and others with this great question, it would be important to talk to your adult service provider agency, your DDD, DDS, to talk about that. And in the state of Massachusetts, they do have an assisted technology initiative through the Department of Developmental Disability, and that would be your starting point. Thank you. And thank you, Christine just shared something about New Jersey. So if you have information about within your state, definitely share it in the chat. Thanks, Desiree. Continue, please.
Yeah, you're welcome. So now we're going to talk about housing. And I want to give a plug that it is so important to talk to self-advocates about housing and what they want. I recently did a visioning session with a group who was developing a neuro-inclusive planned community for individuals who are non-speaking. And they use typing to communicate. So these are individuals, high support needs, high behavioral support needs, self-injurious behavior, aggressive behavior. And so the group assumed that they would be doing like 4-person homes, right? And when I asked the self-advocates, and showed them some examples, I like to do workshops that are plain language. And so when I described what some of the options were, it was very clear from the self-advocates that they did not want roommates. They wanted to live in their own home because they were afraid that they would potentially hurt their roommates or they would impulsively steal their roommates' things. And so it's so important that you are talking to people with disabilities and confirming what it is that they want. So when we talk about housing, there are different types of properties and development types. A property type, and again, this is all within the A Place in the World report, but a property type is really thinking about what is the type of housing unit that would be best. Accessory dwelling unit, is it a single like small cottage or casita? Is an apartment or a condo, or will the noise from neighbors bother me? So I really need detached walls. Is it a townhome? Is a townhome going to be accessible throughout the individual's lifespan? What if their mobility challenges change? Do I have a living unit on that first floor? And then, of course, single family home. So thinking about the property type as well as the development type. The development type is how a unit is organized within the housing stock. So scattered site means that the unit is within the housing stock scattered throughout. So this is your typical group home, a typical apartment in a typical apartment community, just the scattered site with the existing housing stock, choosing a home in the existing housing stock. A neuro-inclusive planned community means that the housing, whether it's an apartment or a pocket neighborhood, that it was designed specifically to be accessible to people with disabilities. Now, it's important to note that planned communities can be provider controlled or consumer controlled. And they also can be affordable or not affordable. And they could include people with disabilities only and be exclusive to people with disabilities, or they can be neurodiverse and have people with and without disabilities living there. So again, you have to be thinking about all of those different options. A neuro-inclusive mixed-use development means that the property also has public space. So maybe there's a cafe on the property that others use, or maybe it has a big community center, or maybe there is a day program on the property that others come and use. So it's not just for those who live there, but that there is commercial or retail or community space within the property. A co-housing community is a neighborhood in which people get together and they choose to build their own neighborhood and then manage their own neighborhood. And so this is very much a lot of intentional community, high relationships, and responsibility to the greater community. Whereas neuro-inclusive planned communities and neuro-inclusive mixed-use development often have like a property manager, or the organization that's part of providing supportive amenities is the one who's managing the property. Co-housing is oftentimes self-managed. Okay, next slide. So when we're thinking about housing, whether it's scattered site or a planned community or an ADU or a single family home, you also want to think about those physical amenities or those design elements that can really make or break housing for some people. So obviously, if you use a wheelchair, you're looking for something that's at least accessible, but better yet, maybe universal design. Also, you want to think about, if you're going to be looking at a planned community, what are the design features that they chose to use to make housing more accessible? When I do market studies across the country, I would say in every single market study, one of the top 3 is easy to clean features. People want their house to be easy to clean, as well as security features, because this population is vulnerable and at risk of predatory relationships. I went to a community in Nebraska who developed an ICF. This was very specifically an ICF for individuals with very high complex medical needs who need 24/7 and one-to-one support. And they were able to build this amazing home in a typical neighborhood where they were very intentional about ventilation. So the way that they created the home brought in a lot of natural light, but it also allowed for increased ventilation. The bedrooms were smaller than the bathroom. And at first I was like, that's interesting, but it made so much sense. There was a track system that could bring someone from their bedroom into the bathroom. The bathrooms were huge. They had these beautiful tubs with huge drains so that if someone did have a BM, it was no big deal. It just went down the drain. Their washing and drying system utilized commercial grade heating so that they could disinfect, sheets and towels and things like that. I mean, this home was built from the ground up to be truly, truly accessible. And so thinking about physical, not just adaptations for people who have physical disabilities, but cognitive disabilities is really important, and thinking about the caregiver. And so there's lots of ways in which we can make housing more accessible. Next slide. So the last thing I want to talk about, and it sounds like in a previous session, you've talked about natural supports. So we're going to talk about supportive amenities. Supportive amenities are those extras that a property can offer. Next slide. These are sometimes offered by the service provider, but often not. In a consumer controlled plan community, this could be a different community-based organization, and they offer this additional layer. So not all service providers have the capacity to create a whole social schedule or to organize life skill classes or to provide, workplace and vocational support, and maybe your vocational rehab department isn't great in your state. These type of supportive amenities are extras that can be developed within housing options. And so it's important to consider those. Do we have time for the next video? It's only 3 minutes. Yep.
Yeah,
okay.
you
So
do.
this next video is talking about the Center for Discovery in New York. And this property very specifically supports individuals with high and complex medical needs as well as behavioral needs. And I wish I could have used the video of the Lombardi family that was just published. So I hope we can maybe find it and share it. But they talked about how because of the attention to healthcare for the residents, they were able to identify that their loved one who had a cardiac challenge was having episodes. And instead of just attributing it to their autism and behavioral challenges, they really recognized that no, this was a medical challenge that needed to be addressed, and it really has saved his life. And so the Center for Discovery provides very high level care for individuals with high support needs as well as complex medical needs in a campus type setting. So let's watch the video.
People are being left behind. The numbers are exploding. Medical complexities grow ever more complex. Time is running out. The time has come to reimagine care. Welcome to a land of healing. A community of empathy, not sympathy. Where breakthroughs are the norm. A world without barriers. Lives are transformed. Food is medicine. And medicine comes from the earth, not just from a bottle. It's a place created for the whole person. For the whole community. Founded on participation, not isolation. Where everyone is the best version of themselves. This is a place where education fosters growth for everyone. Data creates miracles. Research goes beyond the expected. Science makes magic. And for the caregivers, it's not a job. It's love. Soon, the world will follow. The time has come for a place like this in every community. This is the Center for Discovery, Health, Wellness, and Wonders.
So I want to mention that the Autism Housing Network is a resource. There are a lot of properties that are listed on the Autism Housing Network with full profiles and videos, and you could filter for level of support needs, service delivery model, provider controlled, consumer controlled by state. It's not exhaustive because people have to send in an application to be on it. It's free if you are part of a community or you know of a great residential option that's not on the Autism Housing Network. Please submit the listing because we'd love to have them as part of it. So we're going to go really quick through the Public Funding 101. Next slide, please. On the Autism Housing Network, there is a video learning series. And so I have a video that has this information as well as a lot more information. But I just want to make sure that you all are aware of that these public benefits exist and that individuals with IDD are most often eligible because they are a very low income population. So of course, there's Social Security, and in Social Security, you have your supplemental security income and you have Social Security disability insurance. Some people have one or the other. A few people have both because of the way that the funding works. But essentially, this is a cash benefit and it's most often used to pay for housing. Next slide. There's also an energy assistance program in almost all states that can help with heating costs or air conditioning costs. There's food assistance programs, so SNAP or food stamps. There's also quite a network of food pantries across our country. There's opportunity for communication and internet assistance, so free phones, free or discounted internet programs if you are in a consumer-controlled property. Next slide. Of course, there's the State Vocational Rehab Administration, and so that is where you can access job exploration and matching and some job coaching, which then oftentimes will filter into supported employment if you are on a waiver, so you have that continued support. Every state has a disability rights organization, and it might not be called a disability rights organization, it might be called something else, but it is pro bono legal assistance. Now, they don't take every case, and they have a very unique set, usually, of what they will take, but it is an entity that you can contact for legal support if you need some assistance with legal support. ABLE accounts, so important as a savings tool. If you don't have a special needs trust or you haven't done any financial or legal planning, think about an ABLE account. So if you're on SSI and you're worried about that $2,000 asset limit and you can't save for housing, for example, to put a down payment on an apartment, an ABLE account is a tool to be able to do so because you can save extra money into that account and it's not going to impact your means tested programs. Next slide. It's important that you know Centers for Independent Living is a resource. Center for Independent Living have been around for decades. They are in every state. They are funded by the federal government to be able to help people with disabilities stay in their local community. some sills, they'll have different names. They're not always called a Center for Independent Living. But some sills have a lot and great experience working with the IDD population, whereas others have really focused on those with physical disabilities. So it's kind of hit or miss, but you can go to this website and be able to see where your local sill is, and they can actually help you. So if you need help filling out forms, or you want to know how you can get on the notification for when your housing voucher list opens up, waiting list opens up, your SIL can help you do that. So please take a look at that website. A snapshot of potential next steps include create a vision document, right? Work with somebody to create a vision document for the future. Ask questions, start having these conversations. You could use the videos on the Autism Housing Network as a tool to start having these conversations with those that you love, or to be thinking about them yourself. And thinking about, like, what are your must-haves, your non-negotiables, and then, what's your wish list? If you haven't already, figure out how to think about saving for the future, even if it's just a little bit, whether that's an ABLE account, or talk to some form of special needs planner to get ready financially and legally for the future. Also, if you haven't already, apply for your waiver and apply for a housing choice voucher, even if you don't need it yet. Have it as an option. Just apply. Just apply. This way you're on the waiting list. Start practicing life skills now. It's never too early to start, and build that natural support system. I always like to tell people, think about things that happen every week that you don't have to necessarily schedule. So what is an interest or a hobby that somebody might have, and start thinking about how can you join that thing that happens every week. So every Wednesday night I'm going to go to this group because they're having a Bible study, or there's a knitting group, or it's bingo night, or it's whatever your interest might be. Thinking about building that natural support system, and sometimes just showing up over and over again. I know it's hard to make friends. It's hard to make friends as a neurotypical person, and it's very hard for people with disabilities. But we have to at least think about, what does life look like beyond mom and dad, and start building that natural support system and help people understand that. And that you're not always the one necessarily that they see, that this is John, or this is Rebecca's son, or this is their daughter, but that person with a disability is seen as a person, as an adult on their own. I know it's hard, easier said than done. So by all means, visit the Autism Housing Network. There's a resource directory, there's video series, there's frequently asked questions. We have a really cool merch store that use neurodivergent art and artists. So by all means, however we can be of support, we want to be of support. And I thank you for having me today. And I believe we have a few minutes for questions.
Thank you, Desiree. Everyone, if you could post your questions. One of the questions that was previously asked was, what was the name of the ICF that you were referencing? I think it was regarding the smart home, perhaps.
Yeah, so that's ABLE Inc. in Dickerson, North Dakota.
Thank you. And someone shared the Discovery Center no longer works with young adults. I'm not sure if that's valid information. But thank you for that, whomever shared that. And yes, so everyone, you'll get a copy of the recording. And Desiree, I want to share that there was so much rich content here. And again, for all of us who have sat through many housing webinars, or maybe one or two, we always come away feeling a little bit like lots of information. How do I digest it? And I always say, just come with a few takeaways. And then you can look at this recording after. We'll send them out to you later next week, or the first week in February. And you can kind of go through it and take some more time with it. Also, we will send you the PDF with the chat. In the chat, I did share that if you have more deeper questions, feel free to reach out to me and our team. Here at the Transition Center, we have free consultations available for people. We also have a fee-based model for those that need more support. We've had a lot of professionals today who have shared their websites and information on how to reach out to them. And we want to thank you all for that, because that's really, really important. So we can go to the next slide. We have some resources. I want to share with you that part of getting ready for housing is transition supports. And we'll go to Life Launch. Thanks, Janine. Life Launch is a new transition program for 18 to 22 that we're really excited about launching in July. And this is a residential program that we would love you to explore and learn, because the next step will prepare you for transition outcomes. And I know for sure, working with students for 15 years, transition programs are key. So there is a QR code that will pause a moment while you take out your cameras and take a snapshot of that, please. While you're doing that, my colleague Lydia Sheehy just posted her consulting website. She provides really affordable supports around benefits and SSI. Next slide, please. Again, more information on our transition counseling, and there's a QR code that we welcome you to click on if you'd like to have some more one-on-one supports. Mara, we'll be talking more a little bit about the Life Launch problem individually, but if you click on that, we'll give some more information on the details of the curriculum and the residential piece. Thanks for asking.
I do want to give a plug about transition programs. They are so incredibly helpful for some people. And it really, that jolt from living with mom and then living on your own, that transition programs can really help soften that and kind of give that individualized structure and support to gain the life skills needed and the confidence to be able to be successful in their next phase of residential options.
Thank you. That is so true. And Darcy, great question. All of our speakers thus far have been speaking about programs and options and possibilities beyond Massachusetts. But of course, there are some specifics that Doran shared last week that were more Mass specific. So thank you for that. We do have a Facebook group. So if you take out your camera and click on the QR code, we'd love you to join. And that is a wonderful community to share and learn and really build that community, which is really a key piece of what Desiree and Denise and Doran and I and our team have always spoken about. And here you are today, and this is your new community. Next page. So tonight I want to share with you, oh gosh, I wish I could get this quick. Maybe Alex, you could grab it. We have a really great talk tonight, and I will welcome you all to come. We have a two for today. So tonight we have actor Amy Brenneman, who is also an activist. She's from the Netflix series The Old Man. And we have blogger Daniela Minnie talking about letting go and stepping back. And it's a really inspiring panel tonight. And I think it's so important because I've learned so much from you as parents. And tonight, Amy and Desiree will be sharing their story. And that's at 6:30 Eastern Standard Time for 1 hour. You can have your camera off, be in your jammies, have a sip of coffee, and just sit back and join us tonight. Transition talks are really meaningful. And Alex just posted the link so you can register tonight. Thank you, Alex. And again, last but not least, I'd like to take a little bit of time so you can learn about how to save the chat if you want to do it right now. Thank you, Tamara, for sharing a resource in Massachusetts, Seven Hills Foundation. If professionals want to add their contact information, we're at the 1 o'clock hour. Desiree, thank you so much. You are an amazing resource, and we have your contact information in the slideshow. So we welcome you in our community, and thank you again. And thank you, everybody,